So I really like NXT. Out of all the WWE brands, it feels like the one that is happy to take the most risks, and sometimes it's totally crazy. Of course, now they have the relationship with TNA, we're doing the whole, oh my gosh, here come the other promotion angle. It's just fun, man, and wrestling is meant to be fun. Of course, the idea of NXT is still to take brand new wrestlers and turn them into superstars, and we have seen many of these. I mean, look at Oba Femi right now. If that guy doesn't main event WrestleMania one day, something has gone very wrong. Sadly, on occasion, however, there are people that should be pushed up to the main roster, and for one reason, it never happens. So sit down with me as we do go through this, because I am Simon Miller, and he's 15 more experiments from WWE Developmental that didn't really work out. Number 15, Blue Pants. So this goes back to the black and gold NXT, where once again it was just nuts. And even though a lot of what we saw in the ring was essentially the independent scene just shone in WWE, every now and then somebody would come along that just stood out, and we did something fun with them. Enter Lever Blue Pants Bates. Now you could call her a cult hero, but that doesn't really do her justice or underline just how remarkably over she was. You absolutely shouldn't sleep on this though, because she had so many cool moments in NXT, she just knew how to interact with that audience. Amazingly, she only wrestled 10 times on the show in 2015. When she was first introduced, it was to take on Carmella and ultimately lose. In fact, she lost all but one of her matches, but once again the fans didn't care, they were just into the gimmick. And they're not entirely sure what did happen. It sort of felt like both sides fell out over something, but that's utter speculation. But either way, they cut ties, and we never saw her in NXT again. You can't forget what she did do though, and a great example of this was not actually a match, but a surprise appearance alongside the Vaudevillains at TakeOver Brooklyn in August. It was the biggest crowd of the brand's history up to that point, and they went utterly berserk for Blue Pants, as she became the counter to Alexa Bliss's interference. I tell you too, if Sasha Banks and Bayley hadn't also wrestled on this card where they essentially changed the game, nobody actually would have got a better reaction, because once again, Lever Bates was massively over. And of course, you never say never in wrestling, so we can cross our fingers, but if WWE is ever able to get this going again, well, they absolutely should. Number 14, Lana. So we all know how great the pairing of Lana and Rusev were, and their highlight in WWE is probably when they came out at WrestleMania to face John Cena, and they were in a flipping tank. And I often think about this. It is essentially living the dream. After a while, Vince McMahon couldn't help but break them up because that was his favourite thing to do, which saw Lana go on a little bit of a journey to try and find herself. Eventually, this meant going back to NXT in 2017, and when April rolled around, well, she did try a new gimmick at some live events, which essentially we could describe as a danced-focused persona. There was a mystery woman with her as well, and the only way to describe this is Lana put on a bunch of denim, and yes, she then wiggled her hips all the way to the ring, and it was just a little bit awkward. Now, I don't know if that was the intent or just how it went down, but the one thing I do know, and you can see this on the internet right now, is that the reaction to this was not overly good. In fact, fans thought it was pretty damn bad. I think mostly it was because we'd already found the perfect role for Lana, and now for some reason we were trying to eke away from it. And the main word that was used to describe this was cringy. I mean, it was a little bit cringy, but fair play to Lana, because I doubt she came up with this, and at least she committed. But yeah, that was never going to work. I mean, what even was it? What was the benefit of dancing to the ring? Nobody ever told us. The music was also pretty darn weird. There was an immediate retooling because before long she was just put in a ball gown and made to look more elegant, and that really was more in keeping with the theme and persona needed. But yeah, in terms of ideas we tried to get over, and ones we then threw out the window, well, there's few that went faster than this. Number 13, Marcus Lewis goes bald and then he goes mad. So I know a lot about being bald because I am bald myself, and yes, there is a bald agenda in wrestling right now. Have you heard the terrible things they shout at Dax Harwood and Ricochet? It ain't right, man. And don't forget, one day Mother Nature is gonna come for you. A lot of people do say that NXT was in its golden era from 2014 to 2016 because not only did they have a bunch of stars, but every single takeover show they did was actually excellent, to the point even the main roster would be like, wait a minute, we don't have this kind of freedom, what the flub is going on? This was only really true, however, though, if you were considered important in your role, because the people just below this, well, my gosh, they got thrown some crazy stories. One of these did come in the former Legionnaires tag wrestler Marcus Lewis, who went through quite the transformation after he did lose to Enzo Amore. Their whole feud was about who looked better, so yes, after Marcus was defeated, he had to get rid of his hair, and apparently that sent him over the edge. Because he basically became Kane or a Gene Snitsky, I suppose, from the mid-2000s, and yes, he turned on partner Sylvester Lefort because once again he couldn't handle this change. He then had a program with Tyler Breeze at the end of 2014. And of course, lost and lost and lost, because there's no other way for me to put this, he didn't have any hair. That's about as deep as it went as well. And no, I did not mean that as a pun. This pattern just continued on until he was released in 2016, and sadly that wasn't a surprise. I mean, you can find snippets of this on the internet, and I doubt anybody is gonna go, man, there was potential with this. I think somebody just accidentally sneaked on the creative sheet, just translated it as, okay, we'll make him bored and crazy. Let's not do this again. It was dumb. Number 12, Angelo Dawkins. So Angelo Dawkins has been around a long time. In fact, he was in NXT all the way back in 2012. And in case you can't do maths, as of me talking to you, that is 13 years ago. It's an amazing tale though, because it is a story of perseverance, patience and consistency, and right now he is better than ever. Like, the Street Profits are a great tag team, and Montez Ford has all the potential in the world, but so does Dawkins. That man can go. Of course, before he got into this duo though, Angelo was being booked as a singles wrestler, and his gimmick was kind of, I am just so happy to be here, even though I keep losing. He was always super happy, he wore a backpack and headphones for some reason, and he would just smile and dance before literally being carted out of the arena after suffering yet another defeat. So if we are going to label this what it was essentially a losing gimmick, but he didn't care, and that was meant to make you like him. I suppose it must have worked, because after a while somebody did pair him with Montez, and now he's a mainstay on the main roster. But once again, you can go back and watch this and report back to me. Do you think this guy was ever going to main event WrestleMania? I think not. Number 11, Nikos Rykos. So you can see a picture of Mr. Rykos or Mr. Rykos potentially on the screen right now. And yep, that is some interesting ring gear. But at least you know where he was from. He was Greek. Sadly, Nico didn't do all that much and essentially was a one and done kind of a dude. Although he did get beaten by Keith Lee during the Limitless One's Breakout 2019. He actually got a final shot for the WWE proper as one half of the inadvertently hilarious tag team, the East Hampton Polo Boys, who quite literally appeared on Raw. They were essentially a modern-day Mean Street posse, and yes, were brought in just so the Viking Raiders could absolutely pillage them. And ever since then, he's been quite the regular on the independent circuit, and even had a couple of matches in 2025 for Titan Championship Wrestling in New Jersey. So that Mother Hubbard is still going. Doesn't actually feel like he's going to make it back to NXT, but the guy that's actually from Sparta, New Jersey, quite clearly does enjoy professional wrestling. Sometimes that's all you need. Your goal doesn't have to be to become the biggest wrestler ever. You could just be happy with bouncing around. Number 10, Oliver Gray. So this is a weird one for me to talk about, because Oliver Gray is British legend Joel Redmond, who I have wrestled and actually trained with, so I can tell you firsthand over on these shores. Well, that Mother Hubbard knows what he's doing. If you do go back to 2012 though, he was actually one half of the NXT Tag Team Champions, and yes, he stood alongside Pac, who of course then was Adrian Neville. The duo somewhat unexpectedly defeated the Wyatt family in a tournament final in February 2013, but very sadly, Gray, as he was known at the time, suffered a horrendous injury when he went down with an anterior cruciate ligament problem. It meant that Bo Dallas had to step in as a makeshift champion, and then these two did lose the belts to Luke Harper and Eric Rowan in May. The issue was 12 months later when Oliver finally returned to NXT, it had just changed so much, he had essentially been lost on the shuffle. I mean, Neville had gone on to become the heavyweight champion of the brand at that time, and really no one ever sat down and figured out how Oliver Gray could fit back in. He did fall short in a battle royal to determine a number one contender for his former friend's gold, and really we should have let him win that. The story would have told itself. He did soon get released, but again, Joel Redmond did return to these shores and went over to All Japan, and he absolutely kills it. And I can tell you firsthand, if you ever do see him live in person, you'll be like, oh my gosh, that dude can go. Number 9, Tim Weiss. And this is actually amazing, because Tim Weiss is actually a former Bayer Leverkusen youth goalkeeper. He's also one of these dudes that somehow combines soccer with wrestling, and they seem to be increasing as the years go on. He got offered a spot in the Performance Center back in 2014, probably because even by that point, WWE was going, do you know what we want to make more of? Athletes that become sports entertainers. Let's start here. Now, his big break kind of came in 2017 when Weiss joined Sheamus and Cesaro to defeat Bo Dallas and the Shining Stars, and yes, that went down at a Munich house show, which makes all the sense in the world. He'd also gotten way bigger at this point because, of course, he wanted to become a superstar. When all of this got really bad, because it turned out this match was going to be a one and done. We never really heard much else from him after that, and by 2017, he had left the organization completely. It's such a shame we can't report more on this, because who knows what his potential was? Who knows what would have happened? I mean, by the time the NIL program began, it always felt like sports people got way more leeway than anybody else. I guess we will never know. Number 8, the original Ascension. So many fans do forget there was actually the original Ascension, who were not the Ascension that would eventually make it to the main roster. In the early 2010s, they were already doing their act in FCW when they were brought across to NXT, and this was Connor O'Brien and Kenneth Cameron, or Bran from TNA, and the guy that would eventually go on to become Connor. The thing is though, this version had an entrance that was seriously impressive for the time, as they spliced pre-recorded B-roll with live footage, and they just came across as so damn menacing. You can go back and look at message boards from the time. Everybody was like, well, we should call these two dudes up. They're probably going to reignite the tag team scene. There was also a mini feud with the Usos in 2012, and in between all that, man, the Ascension just absolutely dominated smaller teams, and that made them even more popular with the crowd. They also looked like they were way bigger than most of the people that NXT were using at the time, before all of a sudden, it just fell flat. Victor was brought in instead, and they still did make a name for themselves up on Raw, but when these two were acting as the team, well, you do have to say it didn't work out, because it quite literally never worked out. It was so damn strange, because they really did feel main roster ready. That's the problem with wrestling. You just never know. Number 7, the Ascension 2.0. So we should probably talk about the Victor and Connor version of this as well, because once again, they were essentially booked like the Road Warriors and told to squash people, and surprise, surprise, that got over. Doesn't matter what era you're talking about, doing such booking is always going to work. They took very little time to plow through the majority of the competition too, and they were fixtures of the early WWE TakeOver Network specials, and eventually became an unstoppable pair of NXT Tag Team Champions. They were booked as heels, but were beloved as babyfaces in the Full Sail home because of their work, and actually held those titles for one day short of a full year before they put over Callisto and Sin Cara. The only reason we do throw them in here though is because the idea is always that you do get promoted from NXT to the main roster and absolutely smash it. Man, Vince McMahon didn't have any interest in that. In fact, he found out they were meant to be an homage to Legion of Doom, so then made them cosplay Legion of Doom when they lost and lost and lost and lost. Before long, they both got released. This made no sense and kind of told you that nobody from Raw and SmackDown was actually watching the Developmental brand, otherwise you would not have booked them like this. Number 6, the Mechanics. So here's another name that people have forgotten due to the passage of time. Before they were FTR and before they were Revival, Cash and Dax were simply called the Mechanics. Do you know who came up with this gimmick? None other than the one and only Dusty Rhodes. Now, of course, FTR would go on to become one of the best tag teams of all time, but the only reason we put the Mechanics in here is because it only lasted for 2 matches. The commentators would tell us they were the Mechanics because they were going to strip apart their opponents piece by piece as if they were an engine or something, and that they just didn't care. I suppose Triple H saw this and went, man, we can do way more with this, and they are a throwback to the old school when he dubbed them the Revival, and basically we never looked back. You do have to throw out Dusty Rhodes' name again though, because once again, he just knew these two people would work together, and my gosh, he was right. I mean, look where they are now. But in terms of their first NXT idea, or their developmental concept, well, it was a little bit of a bust. Number 5, Sarray. A victim of bad timing and even worse creative, Sarray's NXT run went from bad to worse, despite NXT rescuing itself from the self-imposed death grip of the Capitol Wrestling Center. Following in 2021, where she got her killer finisher over, Sarray re-emerged in 2022 with an extraordinary reductive schoolgirl gimmick that was just a little bit controversial. It did get worse too, because all of a sudden she told us that she was gifted a medallion with magic powers from Grandma, and that it would be this medallion that would take her to the top of the industry. Now that part I like. I like goofy wrestling. Some people say it's for life. Sadly though, she instantly lost on Level Up, which made you scratch your head, because why the flub wasn't this magic medallion working? Sarray still had to pretend though that this was her future, and when Tiffany Stratton found out about this, she stole it, and Sarray was devastated. Once again, I can't lie, I think this was brilliant and this entry shouldn't be in this list. Clearly NXT management know this was a little bit silly because they did end the whole thing, and I'm pretty sure they told us the reason it changed is because Sarray transformed herself into a different version after going through some kind of special portal. Now, that may not be true. When it was going on, I was a little bit worried I may have taken drugs. It was definitely not believable though, which was always going to rub some people the wrong way. But man, if you can't have a little bit of entertainment with wrestling, then what the flub are we doing? She then left NXT in 2023. Number 4, Hugo Knox. Stuart Tomlinson, as he was known, actually left the UK, where I am right now in 2013, to head to Orlando, Florida, because he wanted to follow his WWE dreams. Now this is another one of these cool stories, because Tomlinson had actually played in golf for Crew Alexandra, Burton Albion, Barrow, Port Vale and Altrincham, and somewhere along the way, he had built some serious size, and this dude was jacked. I mean, it looked like he belonged in the Performance Centre. It took about 12 months to get up to speed before he did make his in-ring debut, and actually he notched up an impressive 62 matches. WWE just released him in 2016. The truth is, when you do go to watch this, he kind of struggled to connect with the audience, which of course you do need in wrestling, although he did briefly sneak onto television to lose to the Vaudevillains alongside one Tucker Knight. So I wouldn't really call this a failed experiment and more just somebody that gave it a go and it didn't really work out. Although it wasn't great, we changed his name to Hugo Knox. I mean, what does that mean? It sounds a little bit silly, and like you just grabbed two random things and stuck them together. Number 3, Duke Hudson, poker player. So Duke Hudson, poker player, didn't exactly make sense in its own context. However, there was such a bizarre normality to a wrestler having an outlandish gimmick in NXT that everybody just nodded their heads and went, alright, well, we're just going to accept it and see what happens. Now, I actually think this was a help to Duke at first during the 2.0 era, because for a little while there, it sort of felt like every single wrestler just had the same gimmick, when all of a sudden Hudson got recast as the man who literally held all the cards. We learned this through a series of vignettes as we were told very strongly, don't forget that a poker player can absolutely take these skills and transfer them to the ring. Sounds nuts to me, but what do I know? It's kind of funny as well, because do not forget he was just randomly Brendan Vink on the main roster during the pandemic before that was dropped too, and no, this did not translate all that well at all. I didn't actually mind it when he started to host in-ring card games, because once again, goofy wrestling for life. But fans didn't like it. In fact, they got a little bit annoyed. Once again, this was a gimmick that was dropped before Duke Hudson went back to school and joined Chase U, before he got released in 2025. And I will never understand that one, because he was such an important part of that act, and finally had gotten himself over. I tell you, man, sometimes wonders never cease. Number 2, Jason Jordan in other tag teams. So there have been select cases in WWE history where a wrestler keeps finding himself in a tag team and then breaks up those tag teams because said wrestler just wants to be a single star. It isn't really a comparable example, but Steve Austin loved to do this. I mean, during his career, he teamed up with Shawn Michaels, Dude Love and The Undertaker, and after a few matches, he always turned around and gave them a Stone Cold Stunner because DTA Mother Hubbard. Bad News Brown was another guy that just turned on his colleagues at a moment's notice, and he even walked out of a Survivor Series match. He couldn't be asked. And when it comes to Jason Jordan, we all know he found his kindred spirit with Chad Gable in NXT, because American Alpha, especially if we are talking about the Developmental brand, burned brighter than maybe any other team that we've ever seen. I mean, if you have never cast your eyes on them, you have to do it right now. I mean, the potential these two guys had, it was endless. Sadly, he did have to retire in 2018, but the gimmicks we tried before this kind of summed up that at one point it looked like it was never going to work. Because before all this, he had a team with CJ Parker, and that didn't work out. When we tried with Ty Dillinger, and that fell by the wayside too. There was absolutely a period where people were scratching their heads going, what are we going to do with Jason? And even when he first teamed up with Gable, the fans were like, well, we've already tried this, why are we trying it again? In fact, it was Chad Gable that had to push this and say, please, Jason Jordan, I want to give it a go. When he finally worked him over, and thank goodness he did. Again, if you want to see a bunch of 5-star matches, go watch American Alpha. They are one of the best of modern times. Number 1, Liv Morgan. Now, of course, in 2025, we all know that Liv Morgan is going to become an even bigger star than she already is. That awfully timed injury she suffered a few months ago really derailed her, but it's not going to stop her when she does return. She'll be a babyface and probably be the women's champion before the end of the year. Or maybe she even wins the flippin' Royal Rumble. The real name, Gianna Daddio, and yes, I'm not making that up, used to take absolute pelters from fans though, mostly when she was down in NXT doing this gimmick. Now the NXT crowd actually liked what she was doing as the babyface New Jersey character, but what they seemed to have a problem with was that her matches weren't of the standard expected thanks to those that had come before her, and yes, that was essentially the 4 Horsewomen and Asuka. Some people even said that it all felt too similar to Carmella, and that they didn't really understand what the future was going to be. Of course, she then got called up to the main roster in the Riot Squad, and while that was okay, well, it was a little bit widdly-piddly too. Now, the one thing I do want to point out here is that you should always take everything you see in NXT with a pinch of salt, because you are quite literally watching people get their sea legs. Often they can be so green and not ready for TV, but the only way to get ready for TV is by having matches on TV. It's a chicken and egg scenario. If anybody is the poster child, though, for allowing somebody to have some time to develop in Developmental, it is Liv Morgan. I'm totally convinced by the end of 2026 she is going to be one of the biggest stars in the industry, and she has mad crossover appeal too. It is kind of nuts though if you do go back to watch what she was doing in Black and Gold NXT. It really felt like she didn't know what was coming around the corner, and then a few years later, she figured it all out. I'll be so intrigued to see what the conversation will be in about 12 months' time. I think most people will actually have to admit that she has come so far. So patience, my friends. Patience is a virtue. Know of any other experiments in NXT that didn't really work out the way that people intended? Well, make sure you let us know in the comments below. If you like the video, share the video and subscribe. You can also click the video on the screen for the part 1 of this series. But otherwise, my friends, take care of yourself, and I will talk to you again very soon.